Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there and welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about the business benefits of running occupational road risk programs. So what do you do with your drivers within your business? What's the best way to approach this? Who do you talk to? How much is it going to cost? But probably more importantly for the small business owner, how much is it going to save your business long term as well? Joining me in the studio today is David Richards from DriveTech. David, lovely to have you with us on the program today.
Thank you, Steve.
People are going to be thinking, and they've just going to heard that introduction, they're going to be wondering what the heck we're going to be talking about. Occupational driving risk. What do we mean by that?
I think it's more about people who drive for work. So, you know, people employ people, they send them out to do some work, servicing, salespeople, people like that. And they perhaps just say, so long as I've got a driving licence, they'll be fine. But the statistics worldwide show that driving for work is quite a dangerous occupation. An activity.
Is it a case that you're on the road more? It's a bit like saying, you often hear the expression, the place you're most likely to have an accident is near home. Not because you're familiar with where you are, but because that's the bit of road that you drive the most on.
Yeah, you're most familiar with it. The driving for work is different because you have other pressures on you. So if you think about it, you've got a meeting to get to, you might have a time pressure, you might be thinking about a meeting like when I was coming in today, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, your mind drifts. What you've got to make sure, Steve, is that you really concentrate where you need to concentrate and you relax when you can. So, for example, on the M25 when I was stationary this morning, I was relaxing, looking forward to coming to see you today, and then when I'm in an urban area where there's lots of hazards and issues that you need to be careful about, that's when you really need to concentrate. And that's sort of what we're trying to do with our training.
Do you think we're a bit blasé when it comes to the level, the quality of our driving skills in this country? I was watching a program the other day. My dad's 95. Up until a few weeks ago, he was still driving. He may well drive again. Who knows? But I was looking, 104 years old was this chap, and he'd never had a driving test. I think he started driving in 1935, the year that they started doing the driving test. They brought the test in. And he was actually very competent. He was very competent-ish on the road. There was a 96-year-old who was a ninth Dan in judo who was on the programme, and the assessors said he was very, very comfortable with him. But one of the issues that came up repeatedly with the older drivers was that they didn't know the highway code. Do you see that as an issue when you go into businesses? Is it the book that we read to pass the test and then we file firmly in the waste paper bin?
I think it probably is, Steve. You know, you pass a test and then you think you've got it all, you know it all. The way I look at it is driving is a team sport rather than an individual sport. So basically when you get out on the roads, you have to coordinate with other people. And that means you need to take their decisions into consideration. And having the highway code is important. If you can look at it, it's a really good reference guide. It changes on a regular basis, so the law changes, so people need to keep up with that. Because in essence, everybody thinks they're above average drivers. When we go out in the car, we've done it so many times, we're on familiar routes, we think we're actually really good. When you compare yourself to other drivers, you probably are. If you compared yourself to Lewis Hamilton, you'd probably say, well, actually, he does have a few more skills than I have. So we're not comparing ourselves against the best, and therefore we probably have an overinflated view of our actual driving ability. And the stats and the crashes that we have every year show that that's the case. I mean, worldwide, 1.25 million people get killed due to road crashes, and about 40% of those are people who are believed to be driving or involved in some kind of work activity.
Now, I'm not asking you to make company policy here, but do you think we should be tested more often on a personal level? Do you think drivers on a yearly, biannual, or maybe every 5 years or whatever, or the older you get, the more often you get tested. Do you think that would be a good thing to introduce, or is it just really cost prohibitive?
Well, I think you need to look at it from a pragmatic and practical point of view. I think we'd all agree that there is a benefit in checking that you're all right to drive. The reality is, would it be enforceable? How would you make sure it happened? And I think those are the issues you need to look at it in some more detail. But yes, any training you have, I mean, I'll give you another example. A lot of people in this country have been caught speeding on a camera. They go on a speed awareness course, and for 4 hours, they have to reflect about their driving behaviour over recent times. And what most of them do is come away thinking, actually, I've learnt something new, because it's the first time quite often in their whole driving career that they've actually had some training. So people are interested in the driving activity. It's one of we do it every day nearly, and it's probably the most dangerous thing we do on a regular basis. So if you have a bit more information about it, like going on a course, you'll have a better insight and probably make better driving decisions.
Your organisation goes into businesses, and you're talking to business owners, SMEs, entrepreneurs. When you go in there and you're talking to them, is there a misconception, a general misconception? What's the biggest mistake that perhaps they're making when you approach them? Do they think, yeah, well, everyone's fine, they don't need the additional training, everybody... Noel Edmonds once said, everybody thinks they can drive a car fast and be a disc jockey. Is there that kind of mentality going on?
Well, we have a bit of a joke in our business that our biggest competitor is apathy. People think, well, actually, it won't
Shall I get their website up?
I think the most important thing is you are realistic about the situation you're in. If you're running a fleet of vehicles, the statistics show that on average, it is likely one of your vehicles may be involved in a crash during the year. Don't know how severe that might be, but can you, even as a small organisation, afford people to be off work? Sometimes it's not the cost of the crash that's important, it's the sort of hidden costs, like if somebody's hurt or has to take time off work or they've got whiplash, or in the worst of cases, if they hit somebody else, like a cyclist, you know, the costs involved in that for a business could be overwhelming.
So is it a difficult job then to sell that concept onto business owners? Are they nearly blind to the significance of good driver training?
The reality is some are and some aren't. There's many organisations who, what I would call, already have a safety culture. So if you look at the pharmaceutical industry or the instrumentation industry or the utilities, you know, safety is part of what they do. It's a really critical part of it. So going into them and talking about the safety of their employees, frankly, is not as difficult a conversation as if you go to another industry where safety is not considered to be important. You might make even a joke about health and safety. We hear those jokes over the years. But if they understand that actually, in addition to being legal, because the health and safety executive puts on, requires companies to act on health and safety, so you can make sure you're compliant. But then you can go more further than that. You can take the compliance and making sure you're legal into a position where you're actually getting a real business benefit from it by making sure your drivers are safer, that you're investing in them, and actually they're having less crashes.
Is there a grey area in this where people are approaching it in as much as many of the business drivers are maybe not perceived as being business drivers? They're driving to and from work. I mean, it's not a business journey. It's not taxable. It's not, you know, and in fact, you've got to be very careful that the moment you start using your vehicle for any form of business, are you covered on your insurance? Are there a lot of pitfalls that you find that business owners and business drivers find themselves in?
Well, I think the reality is that nearly 80 to 90 people a year are killed on our roads in Britain today while driving for work, and there's probably more hurt as well.
Are we talking about people like van drivers, or are we talking about car drivers?
Both, in terms of anybody at work, lorries, buses, etc. There's about 100 people killed every year. Saying that, there's about nearly 100 people killed commuting to work. So we sometimes forget about the commute and people just going back into the office, but that's quite dangerous as well in some cases. The law, though, in particular, focuses on the driving for work activity, not necessarily the commuting. And in law, you need to make sure you assess the risk of your drivers because they're using machinery. And that's the guide you should go with. And if you assess your drivers and then you know that some of them are at risk, you need to provide training for them so they're better and able to take more control over their tasks.
Listen, we're going to be going through a whole number of different things that maybe you as a business owner need to consider when it comes to what you're driving, how your people that work for you are driving as well within your business, and what the responsibilities are to you as a business owner. I mean, what should you be considering when it comes to making certain that your business is within the letter of the law, and also, more importantly, that your drivers are within the letter of the law as well. And also, how do you help them? How do you make them better drivers? There's a lot of half-truths out there that we all read about. I was talking to somebody the other day. I was talking about one of the speed awareness courses, in fact, and the conversation was around the fact that they couldn't see how a small... It's my hairdresser, actually. It's my hairdresser.
Really?
I have one. It's hard to believe, but I do have one. My hairdresser, he actually said to me, I'm a speed freak. He'd been on a speed awareness course, but he couldn't see how a small increase in your driving speed could actually have such a big impact, to coin a phrase, on your stopping distance. He just didn't. He gave me all the reasons, and it's all the reasons that probably you use as well when it comes to the arguments that you use. You know, better performance cars, better performance braking. How can you have that set of rules there that were written whenever they were written, and how do they apply to today's drivers, today's vehicles, today's technology? How do you do that? Later on, actually, we're going to be showing you a video. It's just a short one. It shows stopping distances, I think, in the urban area. It's got Tiff Nadell in it. It's an interesting insight into what your stopping distance is. I remember doing some work a long while back with you, David, time we did it again actually, where we were looking at stopping distances. And the thing that surprised me, if you are on a motorway and you are doing 100 miles per hour, and let's put our hands up, we've all done that, haven't we? So 100 miles per hour, if you were to put your foot on the brakes in the distance that you would have normally stopped at 70 miles per hour, your impact speed into the back of the vehicle will be 70 miles per hour. Now that just doesn't bear thinking about, does it? Frightening. Listen, more to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. We'll be talking to David Richards from DriveTech, so stay with us. We're live here this afternoon. It's great to have your company as always. Live across all the different channels, and don't forget as well, if you are downloading this at the moment on iTunes, you can watch all the shows. There's over 200 shows that are all sitting there waiting for you to get some great business advice for your organization. Now let's look back at last week's program. We talked to Jerry Brown. He is the customer lifeguard. When the customer wins, nobody loses. So what is the customer experience? What's that all about? And does it affect, like your driver education, does it affect the bottom line? Can you make money by having better customer service, a better customer experience? Some organizations, if you're Ryanair, well, until recently probably believed makes no difference whatsoever. Be as rude as you like to your customers, they'll still be booking flights next week. But even he's changed. Let's look back at what happened in last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about the customer experience. Remember, when a customer wins, nobody loses. Joining me in the studio today is a man that lives and breathes customer experience. He talks to multinationals, blue chip companies around the world. Jerry Brown, he is the customer lifeguard.
Well, the name came, Steve, from thinking about what it was that I was doing, and I went out as myself, which I felt quite comfortable about, but it seemed to me I needed something, some alter ego, and so the idea of saving the world from bad customer service as the customer lifeguard seemed to play quite well, and people seem to like that. I think the feeling is that it's not necessarily getting any better. Those bigger companies do have trouble with consistency, and so I think anyone that's had a bad experience with one of those companies typically will say, well, I called one person and this is what happened, and then I called again and I got a totally different experience. And they're challenged with that. That's a tough thing for them. Interestingly enough, right after that, and I think we may have mentioned on the program, but Michael O'Leary, the CEO of Ryanair, said, about all of the complaints he was getting and all of the people that were tweeting and doing all of these things on social, he said, you know what? He said, all of those people that are on social media, they'll be booking with me next week. The 4 C's of customer experience: culture, communication, commitment, and community. And the culture, if the culture isn't there, and you can't mandate culture, this is something I've said a long time, but you know what the culture is like. The culture at a WestJet in Canada, I've actually done some work with them many years ago when I was still in Canada. Fabulous people to work with, and that does come from the top. And it comes from the top, and the experience I had was a great example of it. We had an empowered employee who could make a decision, and as I said, you can't have them giving away $100 to everyone, but they were able to make an assessment, understand the situation, and had the freedom and the ability to do something about it. And so when I look at this, I looked at this and I thought, this isn't accidental. Companies just, whether you want to go as far as to say they don't care, I think many don't, but they don't bother to fix these things. And if you let these things fester like anything else, it just gets worse. And so the people in the organization, you ask about the people, they look at that and they go, well, they can't be bothered to fix this, why should I bother? But I think as customers, we know this isn't fake news. We know how bad things are sometimes for us. And again, a lot of these clippings that I keep and a lot of the references I make are that. Interesting one on the weekend from Ian Day, who writes another column in the Sunday Times. He said, he was talking about BT, and he was talking about the fact that BT shares have dropped. Interesting enough, you talk about utilities. BT shares have dropped by a half. Centrica, British Gas's parent company, shares have dropped by a half in the last year or so. And so from a shareholder perspective, even if you put the customer aside, from a shareholder perspective, they're starting to make some noise about, well, why is this happening? When you make a formal complaint, either through the Ombudsman or through the FCA or one of the Ofgem, Ofwat, any of these, that costs the business a lot of money. It will vary, but let's say it's £500 to £1,000 for them to address a formal complaint. And the more people that do that, the more it's going to cost those businesses to do that. So things like this will start to affect the bottom line. And when the board meets and says, well, wait a minute, we've seen a tremendous increase in complaints, and those complaints are now costing us X, what are we doing about it? And only when those questions are asked by people like that are things going to happen. So the 4 principles are culture, communication, commitment, and community. And I developed those because I looked at what other really successful businesses were doing, and ones that not just brand new businesses, but businesses that have been around for a while. So one of the things I say is that the biggest challenge to communication is the fear of litigation. If you look at the airlines again, when BA had their meltdown last summer, when the train companies have an issue, what's the thing you see when they interview people most on TV, when they're interviewing the passengers? What is it that you hear mostly from them? You mostly hear, they didn't tell us what was going on. Nobody told us. Nobody heard. Most people understand if things happen. What they don't understand is why you can't tell them what the next step's going to be. So I'm Jerry Brown, the Customer Lifeguard. I am on a mission to save the world from bad customer service, and I'm trying to do it one customer at a time. But I think the point I would like to leave you with is really just to say what I just said to Steve. As an organization, as a company of any size, you do control your own destiny. You do control the ability to deliver a great customer experience. And you will probably find that if you bring this to your employees, they will absolutely engage with you. We've heard about employee experience, how important it is. If you make the point to them that this is great for everybody, that this is something that they can participate in, they're not being told they must do this, they must do that, they play an active part, it will make a huge difference. Because as we said off the top, when a customer wins, nobody loses.
Jerry Brown, the Customer Lifeguard. When a customer wins, nobody loses. A great show. If you're worried about the customer experience when people come to your business, then do watch that programme. Just recently, I tell you, it's interesting. We had Ian Conn from Centrica. He's on the TV just recently. Ian was saying that the reason that prices are all over the place with British Gas and things like that is down to the government. Actually, Ian, let me tell you this, because it's my chance to tell you. I've just left British Gas as a customer and gone elsewhere. It's your customer service that lets the business down a bit. And that's what you need to address. It's your customer service, Ian. It's nothing to do with the government at the moment. That's why I left, your customer service. So if you're Ian Conn, CEO, Managing Director, whatever you are, British Gas, I don't care, watch Jerry Brown, the Customer Lifeguard, and find out why your customer has got such a, or why your customers are leaving you in such numbers, and why you've got such high churn on your numbers at the moment. And I got a great deal. I saved 500 quid by swapping. Took 2 minutes. Like that. In fact, I'm going to put a link on this program. If you'd like to swap as well and you'd like to change and go to an alternative energy supplier, there'll be a link on the page for this program as well, because us consumers have to step back and not accept the excuses of large corporates. We've got to move forward, and what we've got to do is actually take the bull by the horns and make a difference. Vote with your feet, then they'll start listening to you. Now, as I get down off my soapbox, let me move smartly on and just remind you, by the way, if you're thinking this is a great show and a great way to get in touch with your customers, and you're thinking, wouldn't that be great to have one of those? I too could have a soapbox. Then you can contact us here. Ian, you can contact me as well if you want. It's dead easy to do that. The email address is studio@businessconnectionslive.com. My name's Steve Hyland, Hyland, Ian. Studio@businessconnectionslive.com. You can also give us a call on this telephone number on 01784 256 777. Follow our stream of consciousness, BCL Business TV. You can also watch the programme on Facebook as well if you go to the page. But there are over 300 hours of great business content for businesses just like yours to help you with your marketing, with your sales, with getting funding, getting an exec director. It's very diverse, and in this particular case today, also finding out how to make certain that your drivers that are out there working for you are safer on the roads as well. Just go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. Do you know, I don't know where that moan came from. It was there. It's obviously been
Steve,
sitting in the back.
What can I say?
Yeah, for a while.
I wasn't going to stop.
Don't cross me. Don't cross me. Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me.
Come on, back to normal.
Click. Okay. You're watching Business Connectors Live. Great to have your company. We're talking about occupational driving programs today. My guest on today's show is David Richards. He's from DriveTech. Okay, David, let's talk a little bit about health and safety. You were alluding to it earlier on when you were saying why driving for work is an important issue for business. And then you started talking about being compliant with things like corporate manslaughter, health and safety legislation. If we are worried about that and we accept that that is something that we need to be doing, what should we be doing about it?
Well, if you know nothing about it, there's quite a lot of information out there on the internet, to be honest. So if you're a small organisation and don't know even where to start, there's a really useful guide that I downloaded off the internet last night. I just typed in starting with health and safety. It's a 10 or 12 page document. It's a really useful thing to start with. Gives you some guidance as to what you should and shouldn't do. There's slightly different rules for people who've got less than 5 employees, but it's all documented in that document.
It says here, this guide is for employers and those who want some basic information on what they must do to make sure their businesses comply with health and safety law. Yeah. I mean, it's quite a comprehensive, 12 pages actually. It's quite a comprehensive
And there's forms in it and useful information. If you want to go to the next step, there's another document. All you need to do in Google is type in driving for work, and the number one response is this document. It's again health and safety executive, and it's a full detailed document on what you should do if you want to start looking at people who are driving for or at work.
It says here more than a quarter of all road traffic incidents may involve somebody who is driving as part of their work at the time. This figures from the Department for Transport figures. Health and safety law applies to work activities on the road in the same way as it does to all work activities, and you need to manage the risks to drivers as part of your health and safety arrangement. This leaflet suggests ways that you can do this. Once again, another comprehensive document, 10 pages in that one. We'll have links to all of these, or both of these documents actually, on the website at businessconnectionslive.com if you go to this particular programme. Also, if you've got a comment, by the way, of what you've heard so far, then please do leave a comment, and we can get that back to David, or maybe start a discussion on it as well. That's really interesting. So they're two good documents worth having from the HSC.
But I think you need to go forward than that. So once you've accepted, you need to take on board, the health and safety. I mean, one thing I should really share with your viewers today is that in February 2016, the fines or the sentencing guidelines for health and safety dramatically changed. And what it means is that the fines you could get now as a business are not just a standard fine, but are related to your turnover. And what's happened in those last couple of years is the fines, particularly the bigger fines, have massively increased.
Blimey, this sounds like GDPR. It's the same kind of thing.
Well, I think it's more a case of trying to make the punishment fit the crime in a way, in the sense that if you break the law and you're a big company, why should you get the same fine as a smaller company? Because you might have more resources to be able to handle health and safety. I'll give you an example of that, Steve, because I think it just puts it into context, and it is a big organisation. In terms of fines, Travis Perkins, quite a well-known organisation, was fined £2 million with £115,000 of costs because one of their customers died when crushed by a company vehicle on their premises. So what might have seen as just an accident, the consequences of that are quite large. And if you think about it for other companies, I've got a couple of other organisations where things have happened, the fines could be quite substantial, and people need to know that it's not worth taking the risk anymore.
It's interesting, though, that, I mean, the other two examples that you've got on there, the £800,000 one, what's the name of the company?
That's Lane O'Rourke.
And so the cost there £10,000, but the fine £800,000. £750,000 for the last one, which is
Veolia, where
they're the bus company, aren't they?
Yeah, where a worker was crushed to death by a refuse collection vehicle.
Now, is this happening because it's on their site? Does that differ when they're off-site?
Not really, because they have a duty of care for somebody doing the driving task. So if one of their drivers went out and knocked down a cyclist, here in London, a lot of trucks turning left are quite often crushing cyclists. If it's deemed that person hasn't had the right training, or they don't have the right licence to drive, or something like that, then the impact could come back on the companies, and they could be banged to rights in terms of health and safety, or even at the bigger thing, corporate manslaughter, if it's taken to that stage.
This is a dangerous area, isn't it? When we're talking about things, I got involved with a radio phone-in concerning cyclists and trucks, and the radio phone-in presenter was suggesting that the truck should be more visible, and I said, just how much more visible can a truck be when you're right next to it? And sometimes, surely, where does the responsibility for it's another conversation, but where does the responsibility move across from the driver to somebody else? Well,
it's probably on a case-by-case basis. As I said earlier, Steve, driving is a team sport. You've got two people in that case with the truck and the cyclist. The cyclist has a responsibility for making sure that they avoid putting themselves in a dangerous position. And if you look at a lot of trucks these days, they've got the signs on the back saying don't overtake on the inside. So, there's a lot of knowledge about that, and I'm sure, cyclists are beginning to understand that and avoid that situation. But if you've ever driven a truck, you realise actually the visibility you have can be quite restricted. So there are quite a few initiatives at the moment, particularly in London, where they're swapping those roles, where they're getting a truck driver to ride a cycle and cyclists to get into a truck.
Excuse me 1 second. I just want to place my hand in my... Really?
Yeah.
They're not, are they?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I think it's a brilliant idea, actually, because what it's doing...
Well, I just feel it's a lot easier to get on a bike and ride a bike than it is to get off a bike and drive a truck.
No, you don't drive it, just to see.
Oh, you're just sitting there?
No, not to drive it, Steve.
Thank the Lord.
That would be ridiculous. No, I think it's more a case of giving people a view that they're actually... They can get some... the visibility is challenging, and therefore, particularly on the inside, cyclists need to be aware. It's like a lot of the work and training that we do. It's not about the logic or the skills you need. It's about, in fact, where was your head? What were you thinking at that time? What was your attitude? What's your behaviour? So if you're driving cycling in London, you should be watching that you don't get yourselves into a situation on the left-hand side of a truck. Likewise, if you're a truck driver, you should recognise that if you're turning left, take a second look, because if you don't, there might be a cyclist coming up on your inside. So showing people and giving people examples, or giving them the chance to experience the other driver, can pay dividends, in my view.
When we talk about driver training then, and you say it pays dividends, is it train them once, job done, or is it repeated training? Once again, we're going back to the test, aren't we? You know, does it go in the first time, or do you just keep going back there?
Well, I think it's generally speaking, you need to give people information. If you want to change people's hearts and minds, if they like their driving beliefs, what they think is safe and what they don't, it takes a bit of a journey, both in time and in terms of effort, for them to reconsider things they hold very, very safe to themselves. I'll give you an example. When I go driving with my wife, she has a view of what the distance is between our car and the car in front is on the motorway, and what distance she feels that to be safe.
This is a dangerous comparison you're going down now.
I have told her I'm going to do this anecdote today, Steve, so don't worry. My view is the distance should be further away. I like to hold back a bit. It's probably because I've had training from the company and I understand the risks. And when she moves into that zone, I get very uncomfortable. Okay, and what I'm trying to share, and I share with her, is, look, not only accept that I feel uncomfortable in that situation, but here are some of the reasons why I feel uncomfortable, because I can't see as much, or it's more difficult to overtake, or if somebody suddenly brakes, then I'm in trouble. So I think, you know, changing beliefs is about laying out information, getting somebody to think about it, reflect on it, and then they'll make a decision. So to answer your question, driver training generally works better over a long term. Companies who dip in and out of it, say somebody in an organisation has a crash and they say, oh my God, I need to get somebody trained, and then they just do the training and leave it. That'll probably be fine for a year, a couple of years. But, you know, training disappears from your mind. What we found with companies we work with, who work over the long term, in the 3, 4, 5 years with repetitive training, different training, is actually the benefits really start to stick, and that you can reduce your costs significantly in the long term. And I think there's some examples of that we can
We've got a video actually that we're going to show you. This is some on-the-road driver training. You may actually recognise the driver that is being trained in this particular piece of footage. So let's just have a quick gander at that. And I think you'll find this quite interesting, because there are some good points in this very short clip, in fact, in some of the things that you should be able to actually apply to your own driving. Have a look at this.
Hello and welcome. My name's Steve Winnett, and today I'm going to be introducing a driver training course that's a little bit different to the standard courses that you might see out there. So what we're going to look at today are ways of helping that driver to find a better way of doing what they do naturally. By buying ourselves more time within the last few yards, meters coming up to the junction, you'll actually find that you'll get a gap, and you'll be able to take that gap and keep it rolling. So we'll try it at the next roundabout we come to. Continue into brake, really exaggerate the slowing down, even more. Give yourself more time, and we should just drop on the gap nicely. There it is, and we can keep rolling. What we're going to look at is a technique as we drive on a dual carriageway, whereby we can get a driver behind us to copy what we are doing.
By leaving that space
a driver
in
will
front.
mirror you.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you drive quite closely to someone in front and quite quickly, the driver behind will copy. If we stretch the gap, as long as we're not too slow, we'll find that the driver behind will gradually copy that as well. Keep backing off and notice the effect of the driver behind us. Backing off more, still backing off, and hopefully the Jaguar will go and we can go. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that session. You've been able to see firsthand the effectiveness of this type of training. You've been able to see how people really can change their driving behaviour, and through using some key techniques have been able to positively influence the drivers around them. I hope you enjoyed it.
Steve Winnett there. Thank you very much indeed to him as well for that. What are the key learnings from that, do you think, David?
Well, I think the first thing is to recognise that we're working with professional drivers rather than instructing youngsters. That's what DriveTech does. So the style of training that you saw there was somebody coaching and explaining how you can get some real benefits by perhaps coming up to a junction in a different way from what you have previously. So, you know, before I got into this, I used to rush up to roundabouts, slam on the brakes and then charge off just in front of somebody else. But if you could see from the technique there is to approach a roundabout with far less speed so that you can see gaps and then you can move smoothly through traffic. So I think what it's trying to do, that video is trying to do two things. It's not only showing the environment that you're being trained in as a professional driver or somebody who drives professionally, but also works on the mind. It's not about how you change gear. It's all about where's your head. As I said earlier, it's what are you thinking about? Where's your concentration levels? And I think that that video gives you a really good example of that. Having said that, before this training took place, that lady has been assessed for her driving through a formal assessment. So the trainer does have some understanding of the issues that she might find difficult while driving, and there'll have been a discussion with her beforehand to look at issues that she wants to address. So perhaps in that conversation she has an issue with roundabouts or tailgaters, and therefore our training is trying to help specific issues on that basis.
You're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company with us today. We are live across the nation. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. If you do have any comments about the promo or you're finding it interesting, you'd just like to leave a comment, maybe for myself or for David, then please do leave that either on the Facebook page or on the YouTube page as well, for that matter. My guest of today's show is David Richards. He's from DriveTech. We're talking about occupational driver training, and is what we're talking about today. So we were looking there at the health and safety, the legislation. What about when it comes to reducing fleet costs for cars, vans, trucks, buses, coaches, off-roads, 4x4 and specialist vehicles? I mean, it's a long list.
Anything you drive.
Anything that you drive, if it's got a steering wheel in it, an engine at the front and four wheels, reducing fleet costs. Does the trade, I mean, that's what business owners really want to find out. It's all very well having something that's, you know, a nice glossy piece of training like that. Does it really save money? Will it save a business cash?
Absolutely. There's
no
doubt about it. Yes. The reality of it, Steve, it's quite interesting, is that many people decide that all they want to do is to, for example, check a licence. That's the first thing most people do when they want to become compliant.
How many companies are doing that, do you think, now? Are there enough of them?
Probably not everybody who should, but saying that, a lot of people, especially smaller organisations, may not be aware that you can check your driver's licences through the DVLA directly now. So whereas we work with larger fleets, where if you can imagine the administration of doing that is quite large, if you're a small 1, 2, 3 man company, you can ask your driver to give you permission to check their licence, to make sure that firstly they're legal, if they've got any points, or if they've got any restrictions in terms of what they can drive. So that's normally where people start, and that's normally called compliance. If they then assess the drivers and then do driver training, then you can really start to get into the mindset and start to change these driving beliefs we talked about. And we've now seen evidence by working with some of our larger organisations who do measure this quite intensively, that if you do driver training over a long period, you can see significant benefits.
Now we've got some slides that kind of illustrate.
Yeah,
this,
can I show those? Because
yeah,
I think they'll be
which
quite
one's the best one?
So let's start with the first one, which is a company. It's a large organisation we work with. Basically, they looked at their high-risk drivers, so they've already
narrowed that down. Let's have a look at the slide, shall we? Yep.
And this is showing the effects of driver training on the numbers of collisions before training takes place, in the 6 months before training, and then the 6 months after training. So as you can see from this, initially before the training there were 183 crashes for those 100 so drivers, and then after the training there were only 41 crashes in the 6 months afterwards.
So even if you were to take out the error in statistics, that is quite a dramatic drop.
Well, it's quite, you can see it. I mean, picture speaks louder than words on that. If you look at the cost associated with it as well, which is the second chart, you can also see that actually the average cost of a crash decreases from £500 to...
So why is that? Is that an insurance issue, is it?
No, that's because the type of crashes that they're having are less expensive.
Oh, right.
So actually what the driver training is showing is not only reducing the number of collisions people are having, but also the type of collisions. So whereas in the past it may have been that quite a substantial cost or quite big costs involved, we're finding that after training those costs can come down significantly. And then I think there's a final slide to show, which shows an example of an organisation before and after they worked with us.
So what are we looking at here? On the left-hand side, we've got the number of collisions,
and then
along the bottom we've got time, So what's this showing us?
So what it's saying is that this company had been tracking their collision rates and their costs for several years.
God, 2014 wasn't a great year, was it?
No, and I think that's when they realised they needed to do something about it and came and talked to us. And what it shows that after 2014, when they've been working with us, that you can see not only the number of collisions they have, which is the bar chart, but also the total costs of collisions.
Is it really is it saying 3.5 million?
Yes.
That was the cost of the business.
Yes.
So in 2014, 3.5 million was the cost of the business.
3 million. So.
Oh, well, it's just slightly above, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, 3 million. Slightly, so that's the cost of the business, what, in time, people being off sick, damage to vehicles, insurance and all those kind of things. Is that how that figure is equated?
It's mainly the bent metal costs, you know, the costs of the actual recovery of costs and insurance like that. But it's dramatic, isn't it? You can see from that you start working on something and do it over a period of time. What's interesting for me is the number of collisions hasn't dramatically changed overnight. In fact, the year afterwards has gone up slightly.
Yeah.
But actually you can see if they keep on going, changing hearts and minds, working on that programme, you can see the number of collisions coming down, but the costs were impacted immediately. So if you're looking at does driver training save you money, that's a really good example of where it's demonstrating that without any doubt.
Just to reiterate, and this applies to all sizes of businesses, no matter, obviously the figures are going to be different between different sizes of organisations, but ultimately, regardless, if you're a small two-man band, one-man, even if you, for yourself, an individual who is driving for business, you may be entrepreneurial and you're going out, with the right training,
well, it's interesting,
you're reducing risk.
Well, the thing is, Steve, if you've got a big, large organisation and somebody has a crash, you've probably got somebody that can cover for them. If you're a small 2, 3, under 5 members of staff and one of your team gets hurt, you know, that's 20% of your workforce, and they may be a critical part of your business. So you could argue with smaller organisations that if they can save their drivers having crashes, that's probably, in some respects, even more important for them than it is for the larger organisations who have the bandwidth and the capability to handle those issues themselves more easily.
What about the other benefits to this as well? I mean, do the figures correlate? When we say we've got fewer collisions, does it mean safer drivers?
Generally speaking, it is, and we've seen over recent years. When I started in the industry, a few too many years to mention, there were 3,500 people killed on Britain's roads. Today, it's last year published, it's 1,792 people killed. So it's halved. Now, that's not due to just education, that's due to better enforcement and better engineering in cars, etc. But we are seeing
Are we seeing better enforcement, do you think? I'm not knocking the police, but we hear a lot of, they say they don't have the money to get out there, they don't have the money to do patrols, or the manpower for that matter. So
it's changed.
Is it enforcement or is it technology?
It's changed. The number of roads policing officers has significantly reduced over recent years, and therefore, if you like, the chances of being caught, particularly say on a motorway or for bad driving, has reduced. But enforcement continues with people, particularly in the speeding area, to make sure that people aren't breaking the speed limit. I mean, I think the stat that I like on this is that for every 1% decrease in speed, 1% decrease in kilometres, or 1 kilometre an hour you reduce, you can reduce death and serious injury by nearly 3% on average. So if you can keep speed limits on average coming down, you will save more lives.
I talk to a lot of people, and they talk to me, and they say they do. Honestly, they do. And I've talked about as I said earlier on, my hairdresser. He's a bit of a speed demon. He likes to think he is. Tried to explain that he shouldn't be, but he can't see this correlation between a small increase in speed and it actually causing a lot of more injury.
Yep.
Is that factually correct, is it?
Yes, and I think, let's see the video of it, because I think the video that shows impact speeds at different speeds shows why driving, say, 2 or 5 miles above the speed limit in the 30 is really important. If you think about it, you know, if you're driving in the 30, there are lots more hazards there. There are lots more pedestrians, vulnerable road users, and you need to concentrate when you're driving in that environment. So this video just shows you how a little bit in speed can make a real difference when it all goes wrong, which we hope it doesn't, but sometimes it does.
Many people think that driving just over the speed limit makes no difference to road safety. If you're in control, a competent driver, and the road ahead looks clear, why is marginal speeding against the law? This video demonstrates that even a small increase in speed can make a big difference.
What we have is an exercise set out with 2 cones to mark where I should start braking and a cardboard cutout of Anna, who I hope I won't be hitting. Now obviously, as a racing driver, I'm used to hitting the brakes at the same spot, but this test doesn't include that vital reaction time, that time it takes us to wake up to the fact that Anna's stepped off the pavement, the time it takes us to get off the throttle and onto the brakes. This is just the braking distance variation at small speed increases. To check I'm doing the right speeds, we've got a police safety camera van and its operator, Glyn Hollinshead. So Glyn, what exactly is the technology inside your van?
I've got a laser device in there that I use to check the speed of the vehicles, and a camera fitted to it that films everything that I point the laser at.
But how accurate is that result? Within a tenth of a second?
It's absolutely accurate, far more accurate than your speedometer.
Ooh. Well, you'll be checking my speed, and I'll be hoping not to hit Anna. Okay, I've had my speedometer checked and calibrated. I've got the cruise control on, doing exactly 30 miles an hour. At this stage, I don't know Anna's about to jump out in front of me. I've got to wait until the marks, until the cones, before she suddenly jumps out! Hello, Anna. Glad to see you're still standing. Now, they tell me that if I raise that cruise control by just 2 miles an hour to make it 32, I'm going to hit Anna's kneecaps. Now, I can't believe 2 more miles an hour. Anna! I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. Now, knowing I hit Anna's knees at 32, I'm not sure I want to do this. 3 more miles an hour. This is still only 35 miles an hour. 35 doesn't sound that fast! It knocked Anna for 6, though, that's for sure. Now, I don't really want to do this. I'll go 5 miles an hour more. Do 40 in a 30. And this is what it's going to do to Anna. An awful lot of damage.
What you've just seen demonstrates the effect of speed on your stopping distances in urban areas. I think it is frightening that the 35 miles per hour, your impact speed is 18 miles per hour. Imagine slamming into a wall at 18 miles per hour, but at 40 miles, and how often do we all drive at 40 miles per hour? I'm not saying I'm a saint on the road, but 26 miles per hour is your impact speed. So at 40, your impact speed is nearly 30 miles per hour. Imagine being in a collision at 30 miles per hour. More from David Richards in just a moment. He's from DriveTech here on this edition of Business Connections Live. You're watching Business Connections Live. We're live on a Monday. Please do leave a comment under the videos on YouTube, on Facebook, or if you want, you can always tweet us as well at BCL Business TV. By the way, if you're one of the many thousands of people who download the programme regularly on iTunes, thank you very much indeed. You can help us out. We're looking for reviews. We want you to recommend the programme on to other people that are watching similar business programmes like this one. It's dead easy to do. All you got to do is just go into your iTunes account. When you go in there, view the programme in iTunes by simply clicking on the link. That'll take you to the page. You'll see all the shows all there, but you'll also see these tabs. Ratings and reviews is the one that you're looking for. Click on that. That'll take you down to the customer review. Write a review of the show. Say how great the information was, how good David was. Give him 5 stars. It tells us it's great. It also will then recommend the programme onto other people, and that way we get a bigger audience. It's interesting. The audience for the programme predominantly, yes, in the UK, America, thank you very much indeed, Middle East, fascinating, Japan and China. Loads of people watching it there. Don't know why, but for whatever reason, thank you very much indeed for making Business Connections Live as successful as it is today. Thank you very much. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is David Richards. He's from DriveTech. Here we are into the last segment of the programme today. Just going back to what we were seeing there when it came to that speed awareness. Is that something that drivers just don't get?
Yes. Most people think that if you're driving at 32 and you have to stop, the impact speed is 2 miles an hour, or if you're driving at 35, it'll be 5 miles an hour. And when we show this in our speed awareness courses and some of our fleet training, it's a real light bulb moment because people realise that what they thought, it's like a belief they had. We've challenged that, and they'll go away differently, thinking actually, if I control my speed at 35 and it all goes wrong, I've got or at 30 and don't break the speed limit, I've got a better chance of it working out for everybody's favour. So it is, showing it is the proof, isn't it? If you see it on the screen, you can really believe it. If somebody said it to you in an academic way, you'd probably say, "Oh, well, of course."
They would say that, wouldn't they?
But this actually shows it, and that's why we did it, to give a demonstration of how this changes people's minds.
Now, DriveTech have actually published some white papers. What do they cover?
Well, we've done quite a lot of work, both here and internationally. We have an international operation, and we actually operate in 95 countries and 35 languages as well. And one of the things worldwide we're being asked is as the question we've asked about earlier, is does your driver training work? Does it change people's behaviours? And does it save money? And we put two documents together which show that, and the charts we've shown on today's show are within it. So I could show those to you, Steve. One of which is the impact of behaviour on running costs, which is showing, using telematics actually, how you can actually make a difference to people's driving behaviour. It's using our parent company, the AA's information. They did a massive project looking at their fleet, and they've got some real benefits out of using driver training.
It's interesting here, the overview of the actual white paper. Due to a lack of hard data, driver coaching or training is often justified on gut feel alone or by ticking the health and safety box. The document here covers from our own day-to-day experience. We know that the way people drive does directly affect running costs. What has been difficult to prove beyond reasonable doubt is what savings could be achieved by improving driver behaviour across the fleet. Where do we get a copy of this particular one? Is that a downloadable document?
Downloadable off drivetech.co.uk, or somebody can email us at tellmemore@drivetech.co.uk. So long as they said white papers, send it to us, we can respond.
Well, what we'll do, we'll also put the link on the Business Connections Live website as well, or a link that will drive you to the appropriate place. The other white paper, the effect of driver coaching on the bottom line, and I suppose as a business owner, surely that's what you're probably most worried about. Getting serious engagement at senior or board level can be challenging if there are no clear financial benefits and no realistic and significant return on investment from undertaking a particular course or action.
That's a very interesting point we made there, which is fleet managers and people who run fleets quite often get the benefits of driver training. The challenge they have, and they've said it to me at many conferences over the years, is persuading their leadership that it's an issue.
Why do you get that resistance, do you think?
I think it's basically because it's just seen as training. I think driver training is just seen as a training activity, where actually if you show the financial benefits to a financial director, it can have a significant benefit. In fact, in Fleet News recently, we did a poll of fleet managers, and 75% of them said they wanted driver training for people who just generally drive for work to be mandatory, which not only shows that they like what's happening and they understand driver training, but I think it's also saying they want help in selling this concept up to their leadership teams, so their leadership understand the benefits and the value of putting in a program like this, and challenging that whole thing about apathy we talked about earlier.
Listen, there are other benefits. So those are available. They're downloadable from both our website and, of course, if you go along to the DriveTech website as well, for that matter. Some of the other key things that you say here, and listen, we know there are other companies out there that offer this kind of driver training. You're just one of many. So is it the same across the board? Are we getting... I know you're going to say differently, but is it similar, the level of training, the people that are doing the training, is it similar, or do you get what you pay for these days?
I think you get what you pay for, and we tend to be at a premium because of the quality of our fleet trainers, frankly, and the people who actually deliver the training are top class, best in industry. But the other thing we do is we put a lot of work into our systems so that a fleet manager can manage their whole fleet, if you like, at their fingertips, and therefore, running sophisticated systems that help them get the information to make decisions isn't a cheap thing to do, and that's why we price ourselves as we do, because it's the value we're offering which is really important.
This is going to probably be covered in the white papers, but some of the things: lower service, lower maintenance and repair costs for company vehicles. It's got to be taken in for account. I remember when I had a company car, I was going through a clutch every 6,000 miles. I'm sure it was the car. It wasn't me. I never ever sat with my foot on the clutch. I didn't, Your Honour. Lower wear and tear on company vehicles as well. More stable vehicle insurance. So just some of the key benefits from it all. Just come a little closer.
Yep.
Don't run away with me. There we go. Lovely. As always, we're nearly at the end of the show, which is surprising. You'll be pleased to hear.
No, it's a
the
delight.
interrogation is nearly finished.
Enjoyed it.
What we do, we always ask our guests at the end of the program for the key takeaways that we're going to get from today's show.
Yep.
If you look straight down that camera over there, camera number 4, and just say who you are, where you're from, and the key takeaways. Any notes that you need, make certain they're in the right place so that you can see them. Or if you've got this in your head,
it's in my head, Steve.
It's all in your head. It's in my head. So on your head, straight down camera number 4, who you are, where you're from, and the key takeaways for the day, David.
Hi, I'm David Richards at DriveTech. We're part of the AA, the Automobile Association, and we provide fleet safety and driver safety management and driver training around the world in 95 countries, and in the UK as well, and we offer speed awareness courses and other courses in the UK too. What I would say today is look at driving for work as a safety issue, and realise that if you actually put training in place, you can save costs. But there are some activities you can put in place that make it easy for you. So you can have a look at your whole company, identifying areas you need to improve through some kind of health check and survey. You can then make sure, for example, your drivers are legal by checking their licenses. If you're a small company, through the DVLA, or a larger company through a driving license provider like ourselves. And then assess your drivers for their risk. Based on what risk they come out, then give them some training, and then manage that with all the sophistication of a professional system that can help you see your issues at your fingertips and help you in terms of what you need to do. Because if you do, you'll not only make your driver safety, but you'll save your company money as well.
Excellent, fantastic. David, it's been an absolute treat having you on the programme. Once again, there are going to be links to the white papers, also links as well to driving at work, and also the health and safety made simple documentation as well. Hope you found today's programme of interest. It's been a fascinating insight into it. And if you are at maybe that junction in your business's growth, and you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe this is something that we should be considering, maybe what you've done is you've missed a bit of a trick. Maybe you should have been considering it a little while before. Once again, David, thank you very much for being on the show.
It's a pleasure, Steve. Thank you for inviting me.
So then, coming up on future programmes, who we're going to have with us? Emma Tarring's going to be joining me, along with Neve Hutchinson of the Marketing Matrix. How do you get out there? How do you market your business? That's to come on future editions of the programme. Also, in fact, that's next week's programme. Future programmes include Peter Liner. He's the chairman of ABLE, I'm going to say this right this week. Peter Liner, chairman of ABLE, the Academy of Business Leaders and Entrepreneurs. Also, thank you very much indeed. A round of applause. Martin Campbell's going to be joining us too, where we look at the things that you say if you're doing advertising, what you can and can't say. Martin Campbell on the show. Doug Piddock Intermedia Communication Solutions, web meeting technology. We've got a great gadget to show you on that. If you are doing web meetings, when Doug joins us on the show, we're going to be showing you a piece of tech that everybody is going to be going, I gotta get me one of those. It is absolutely fabulous. Also, Rachel Wild is going to be joining us as well. She's from Monochrome. We're looking forward to having a representative from Monochrome back again on the programme. Listen, that practically wraps up today's programme. It's been a real hoot. Don't forget, we do it all again next week between 12 and 1 o'clock. So make certain that you do tune in to us here at Business Connections Live. But until we do it all again, thank you very much indeed for watching the show. And once again, my thanks to David Richards. Very quickly, website, very quickly.
www.drivetech.co.uk.
Got it in there quickly till we do it again next Monday at 12 noon. Have a fantastic week and listen, get out there and don't forget, do drive safely. Both of you. Bye for now. Bye-bye.